Car picked up on the third ring. Me, it's Jay. Not Ray. Car, wait, slow down. Me, I took a deep breath. Carrie looked at the church membership bulletin from '07. She recognized Jason Fisher as the guy from 10 years ago, when she. Car, okay. Me, and he's a T-ball ref. Umpire. Whatever you call them. He goes by Jay. And no one can reach him, not for the last several days. I think he's got Andrew. We have to hurry. Car, does your wife have an address? Me, address? Car, the bulletin. It should list an address. He may not still live there, but it's as good a start as any. Me, okay, I'll call you back. I hung up and dialed Carrie's cell phone. After 5 or 6 rings, her voicemail picked up. I hung up and texted her. Need Jay's address. Check the bulletin. I hopped off the couch and grabbed my keys in a mad rush to get to my truck. I climbed inside and waited, hand tapping on the steering wheel. I started to text Ryan to see if he knew Jay's address, or could get it, when Carrie's text dropped down at the top of the screen. 15 Franklin Drive. I texted her back, thank you. Is Kyle okay? Nursery at church. Fine. I called Detective Carr as I whipped my truck out of the garage. When he picked up, I was almost shouting. Me, 15 Franklin Drive, that's his address. Carr, okay, got it. I've already radioed it in and I'm heading that way. Dean, are you on the road? I turned down the radio, which was blasting some shitty pop song I'd heard a million times. Look, you know this guy is extremely dangerous. I heard his siren start its piercing wail. You and Carrie need to stay where you are and. I hung up and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. I knew he was right, but there was no way I was sitting this one out. Carrie and I had gotten Andrew into this mess and I had a sinking feeling he'd need at least one of us to get him out. I called Carrie twice more on the way. This is Carrie. Leave a message. The second time, I did. Carrie, where are you? Are you okay? Please call me back. Franklin Drive was only about 10 minutes from our house, per my GPS, but I made it in about 8. The streets were always empty on Sunday mornings and I hit almost every green light. If Carr was anywhere near the police station, that meant he'd be several minutes behind me. As soon as I turned onto Franklin Drive, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Carrie's white SUV was parked in front of a small brick house about 3/4 of the way down the street. I recognized it immediately by the purple sticker on the back window. It was from Kyle's school. In that moment, for some weird reason, the only thing I could think was, at least I told her I loved her. And that's a brutal thing to have to think about someone you love. I pulled in behind her and jumped out of the truck. I thought I could hear sirens blaring in the distance, but I couldn't wait. Carrie was inside somewhere. I made my way toward the front door, which was closed, but then I heard some shouting coming from the back of the house, and I saw the gate on the side of the house was wide open. I ran around the side and barreled into the backyard. Jay was standing in the center of the yard, but he didn't quite look how I expected. He was tall, over 6 feet, and had a baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. The beginning of a wispy beard was showing on his jaw and neck, and the hint of a belly protruded through the bottom of his one size too small t-shirt. He stood as if his legs could barely hold him up anymore, like a prizefighter after a losing bout. Andrew stood next to him, atop a box which sat on a tall kitchen stool. Duct tape was wrapped around both his eyes and mouth. He was standing perfectly still, hands at his sides, as Jay screamed at Carrie to stay back. There was a noose around Andrew's neck, tied to the branch of a sycamore tree which hung many feet above his head. Carrie was standing in front of me and to the left, still in her dress from church. It billowed in the breeze around her thin frame. When Jay saw me, he narrowed his eyes. Jay, I wondered when you'd show up, Dino. Such a rude one, you are. Didn't your mother tell you that wasn't nice? Carrie glanced back at me, but kept her body turned toward the thread in front of her. She mouthed I'm sorry before swinging her head back around. Me, just let him go, Jay. I held my empty hands up. I'm sorry for being rude. No one needs to get hurt. Jay, no one needs to get hurt? It's too late for that, bucko. Carrie, what do you want? Jay, you, Carrie. It was always you. Carrie, why the note to the paper, then? Surely there was a better way to have me. Instead, you ruined me. And you outed yourself. Jay, because you lied to me. And I didn't want you to lie anymore. If I'd come looking for you, you never would have had to tell Dean about our little affair. So, I pushed you. And then you had a choice. Tell Dean about your little secret, so he could put the pieces together, or keep it from him and let little Andrew die. Since you're here, I guess it means you came clean. And what a wonderful little moment that must have been. Now everyone will know, and no one will want you, not even your husband. He turned away from her. How's that wonderful marriage now? Do you like my sloppy seconds? Me, okay, you won, Jay. You won. What do you want to hurt Andrew for? Jay, I don't want to hurt Andrew. He rubbed a shaking hand through his hair. All this time. I've been good all this time. When you're good, you're supposed to get a treat. He looked back at Carrie. You told me you didn't want to have kids. You said that. And then I heard them call Kyle's name at his T-ball game, and I saw you in the stands, and I just... He swayed a bit, and when his hip bumped the stool it almost went toppling over. Andrew reached out his arms, balancing himself, and the stool righted. But not before something fell from the back of the box, behind Andrew's feet, onto the ground. Jay leaned down and picked it up. It was a large kitchen knife. Me, you just what, Jay? I needed him to keep talking. I'd heard the sirens for a moment, but they'd stopped. The police were outside. Jay, Carrie was supposed to be mine. And so was Kyle. Carrie, how can we fix it, Jay? She took a step forward. Me, Carrie. Carrie, Jay, how can we fix it? Jay, we can trade. Carrie, okay, fine. Trade what? Jay, your life, Carrie. I took a step forward, but stopped when Jay pressed the knife against Andrew's side and shook his head. Then, he pointed the knife at Carrie. Jay, your life for Andrews. That's the deal. That's what all of this has come to. If I can't have you, no one can. It's the only way. And if you refuse... He brought the knife back and pressed it against Andrew's side, harder this time. You'll have to live with. Carr, drop the knife. Now. Carr was standing in the gate, his service weapon drawn. Jay wobbled to his left and hid himself behind Andrew, putting his foot on the first rung of the stool like he was going to kick it over. Andrew was standing pretty high off the ground, and I realized that if he fell, he'd probably break his neck before he had time to suffocate. Carr, touch him and you die, Jay. Listen to me. Put the weapon down. There were two other officers beside him now, both with their weapons drawn. Carrie, no, wait. Jay paused, ignoring everyone but Carrie. His foot was still on the rung. Carrie, it's my fault, Jay. I know that. She took another step. Me, Carrie, what are you doing? Carr, both of you, stay where you are. Jay, a hint of a smile had crept onto his face. Do we have a deal? Carrie, I can't ever take it back. But I can make up for it. Me, Carrie. It's not your fault. I know he drugged you. Jay, do we? Carrie, I love you, Dean. Me, Carrie. Jay, do we have a deal? When Carrie said deal and charged at Jay, the entire world seemed to screech to a halt. It felt like she was running in slow motion, her tight blonde ponytail floating behind her as if gravity had no dominion over it. I ran then, too, but I was several steps behind her. And I was too late. Carrie, barely 120 pounds, who believed she'd made a terrible mistake and was now going to right it, and Jay Fisher, the 200-plus-pound T-ball ref, who had killed before and thought he owned the life of the one who'd gotten away, collided with a force that I swear was more than the sum of its parts. 10 years of shame and guilt and vengeance exploded underneath that sycamore tree, and as their bodies twisted and fell to the ground, a wayward arm knocked Andrew from his stool. In that moment, which is now frozen in my mind, I had a choice: grab Andrew before he fell, or dive onto the pile and save Carrie. I don't remember making a conscious decision. All I know is the next moment I was holding Andrew, the rope tightened around his neck just enough to make him cough, but not to cut off his airway, as I screamed for Carr to help Carrie. Then I heard two shots, one right after the other. When I looked down, I saw blood. So much blood. I wondered if Carr had missed and hit Carrie. But when Jay rolled onto his back, I could see both bullet holes. One in his chest and one in his stomach. So why was there blood on Carrie? Once I freed Andrew, I knelt down beside Detective Carr. He was applying pressure to a wound in Carrie's abdomen, where a red stain was spreading. When I heard her cry, it was the greatest sound I'd ever heard. She was alive. Yesterday, my entire world almost ended. Today, things seem a little brighter, but we still have a ways to go. I'm sitting in Carrie's hospital room with my laptop, watching her sleep. The knife pierced her large intestine but missed all other major organs. So far, there are no signs of infection, and the doctors believe with rest and time, she'll make a full recovery. I've replayed that moment right before Andrew fell in my brain 100 times. Maybe 1,000. My heart tells me if I'd chosen Carrie, maybe she wouldn't have gotten stabbed. My brain tells me Andrew would have died if I had. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to reconcile that choice, but one thing's for certain, now I know how Carrie felt all those years. It's tough to look deeply within yourself, admit your sins, or mistakes, and seek redemption for them. I think that's exactly what Carrie did yesterday beneath that sycamore tree. She made up for the past. And I'm proud of her. Andrew was returned to his father's care completely unharmed. From what I've heard through Ryan, Andrew's dad doesn't believe any trauma, sexual or otherwise, occurred. This should mean that Andrew will be just fine, too. And that's going to make Carrie very happy when she wakes up. Once their T-ball season gets started again, oh yes, the dads are already trying to get it going. I need to remember to sit down with his dad and explain what Jay's note about Andrew meant. I hope he'll understand. Detective Carr visited the hospital earlier this morning. Jay Fisher is dead, of course, and the prevailing sentiment in the community is shock and disbelief. Apparently, Jay hid his true nature pretty well. He did used to be trim and clean cut, but word was he'd let himself go over the last couple years. Oh, and he never was an accountant. He'd applied to be an accountant at the only tax firm here in town, but got rejected. He didn't turn out to be a mall Santa or Easter Bunny either, so Carr got that part wrong, but they did find wigs and face paint in his home at 15 Franklin. He definitely had a thing for being a clown. And they found some other strange stuff, too. Other poems, just like the ones written to us, except about other people. Some written on paper, some in the white space of magazine pages, and some even on the walls. Carr's checking into the ones that contain first names and other identifying information, but I doubt I'll be privy to what he finds out. If I do, I'll let you know. We talked about 3 Orange Circle, too. Turns out there was a body buried down there, in a shallow grave about 2 feet deep. Only problem was, it wasn't Suzanne Carrington. Carr chuckled after he broke the news and he saw my face, but I knew it wasn't mirth behind his smile. It was bewilderment. In a town like ours, you rarely come across monsters like this. For some reason, they gravitate to more highly populated areas, I guess so they can blend in with the crowd. I asked him how they knew it wasn't her. Turns out, Susie had fractured her left arm pretty badly cheerleading in junior high. Her dad, who Carr said he'd called, although he hated to, asking for any features he could use to identify her, thought it was her ulna. I didn't need those records, though, Carr told me. When someone gets a bad fracture, it leaves a mark when it heals. Like a scar on the bone. Whoever was buried down there in the basement had never broken either arm. I asked him whether he thought Jay was the one who killed the woman. It was a woman, Carr said, you could tell by the shape of the pelvis, and whether he thought he'd ever find out what happened to poor Susie, and Carr said we'll try to identify the bones, but we'll probably never hear the whole truth, now that Jay's dead. And maybe that's for the best. Who knows how many people Jay Fisher terrorized? Or how many he killed? There will be an investigation, and people will wonder, how did we miss this monster? Living right under our noses. And maybe there will even be some answers, despite what Carr thinks, but I think most of them are buried in the dirt with Jay. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your help and advice. Carrie, Kyle, and I will have scars from this. Not on the bone, like Susie, but deeper. And after Carrie wakes up and gets back to her normal self, I'll think we'll all be able to go on, despite them.